want to bring her up to say a few words. Please welcome Ms. Lulu Wang.
Special. I mean, this theater is incredible. So I'm just really honored. Thank you to the festival for programming this and for having me here. And I'm just really excited to share this film with you. I won't talk too much about it. It is a very personal story to me, and I'll be here afterwards for Q&A. So please stick around and ask me whatever questions you want. Enjoy.
Thank you. Please give our organist another round of applause. Phenomenal to have him here. We're really lucky at the Music Box to have him. And without further ado, please welcome Ms. Lulu Wang. Everybody can agree why this has garnered so many awards and so many nominations already through the festival circuit. Thank you very much. Phenomenal film. But this stems from a true life experience and story, your story, which started out with This American Life. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about how it went from your life to This American Life to what we saw tonight?
Yeah, when this was happening to me, I was actually in post-production on my first feature film, which was a screwball comedy. And as this was happening, I was like, well, this is why I love screwballs, because my life is a screwball. This is so ridiculous, but yet so sad, and I knew I wanted to make it as a movie. But a lot of the initial people that I pitched it to were like, we love that idea, but can you just like make it different? Like, we love it, but can you make like the main character the bride, and she comes back and she's the one who has to get married, because that would like increase the stakes. And I very quickly saw like that it was deviating from the story that I wanted to tell. So I set it aside for a while and was working on other projects, and I was on I was doing film festivals with a short film I had made when a producer from This American Life approached me, and he said, I love your voice, what other stories do you have? I'd love to get you on the show. So I pitched this, this story, and it got on right away. And what the first question they asked me when I went in to start working on the project was, they were like, this story is amazing, tell us more. And they said, oh, well, how did that make you feel? And it was just such a different approach to this, telling the story. It's like, asking me how I felt about each moment, as opposed to saying, this is great, but can we cast differently? Can we do this? Can we, like putting their ideas, which was kind of what Hollywood was doing before that. So going through This American Life and taking a more investigative, journalistic approach was really, really helpful, because it allowed me to dig deeper. And then, of course, once the story aired on NPR, within 24 hours, producers were calling, wanting to make it as a film. And there were so many producers calling that I actually got to make a decision. Like, I got to choose who I wanted to make it, and I got to interview them, as opposed to walking in a room and pitching. I got to walk in and say, all right, so you, like everybody else, wants to make it, but like, how do you want to do it? And I was able to pick the producers who saw my vision and were willing to protect my vision.
Fantastic. That's quite an unusual story. I don't think it usually goes that way. Especially with a female filmmaker, and you brought this to life through Sundance, is that right?
Well, I had written it, we were pretty close. We went through the Sundance labs, but really as, it was more of like a last minute, like before we went into pre-production, I did a workshop through Sundance, and it was really helpful because the script was all there, but we did a workshop and did some writing exercises that just allowed me to go even deeper with the characters.
And the characters are absolutely phenomenal. And I think about Awkwafina, and she's got quite a comedic tone to her. And she does in this film as well, but she also shows that she has dramatic chops as well. Tell me about casting her and how she related to this story personally.
Well, when I first met with her, my producer brought her name up and they said, you know, there's this woman named Aquafina, I don't know if you know her. I was like, yeah, and this was before Crazy Rich Asians, and it was before Ocean's 8. So I knew of her because my brother introduced me to her music, and so I was like, the girl who did my badge, like that's who you want to play me? Like, are we on the same page here? This is a drama. It's funny, but it's a drama. And they were like, okay, well, will you just meet with her because she read the script and she really resonates. So I have to admit I was skeptical because just based on her work, like, you know, she didn't have a lot of dramatic lead, you know, as a lead role, a dramatic experience as an actor. And then we met and she told me that she was raised by her Chinese grandmother. Her mom died when she was 4, her mother was Korean, and her father's side was Chinese, and his mother raised her. And so it was such a personal story to her. She studied abroad in Beijing like I did during college. I was like, okay, this is great, it's personal, but can you act? And she's like, well, that's probably what you're wondering. I know, like, let me prove it to you. So she sent a self-tape of a couple scenes, and I was watching it recently, actually, and I remember the moment that made me realize that I had to cast her. It was not when she was speaking the lines, it was in all the moments when she was waiting for the person who was off camera delivering lines, and she was listening and she was silent. Because this character is silent through so much, and yet you have to feel like you're with them and you understand what they're going through. And she had so much emotion on her face when she was silent. And those were the moments when I knew that she was the right one for the role.
And the chemistry too with, can you please pronounce the woman's name who plays Nai?
Zhao.
Zhao, their chemistry together is spectacular. Tell me about working with that and finding Zhao.
Yeah, she is a very famous soap opera actress in China. And so she's worked a lot in her lifetime, and she's also, you know, gets paid a lot of money. And which we as Americans don't think, because we're like, well, we don't know her. So, and she's, you know, not on IMDb. So, you know, she can't possibly charge that much, right? But in China, they're working all the time because it's a giant country, and she plays the grandma on everything. And so she's like, great, another grandma role, right? She's like, well, this is my rate, and the producers were like, whoa, like, we don't know who this person is, and that's not what we budgeted. And so it was tricky, because and I had to fight for her, because when we first got to China, we started casting, we saw a bunch of people, most of which, the ones who were good, we couldn't afford. And so then we were casting non-actors, so I had my casting directors at the park every day, and they were just
a random park.
Yeah, okay. Just like every park around the city, and they were just stopping old ladies and being like, do you want to be in our movie?
No arrests were made, everything was okay.
Everything was okay. But a lot of them were really trepidatious, and they were just like, who are you, what, no? And then the other people who were really hammy, and you know, they would do dances, and we're like, this is great, but they're not an actor. And so we did that for a few weeks before I finally put my foot down, and I found Zhao, and I was like, this is the woman, we gotta make it work. And I called her, I called the producers, so I begged them to pay her more, I called her and begged her to take less, and we made it work. And she came and she met my real grandma, and I think that meant a lot to her, because I said, this is my real grandmother that you're portraying, and I don't know, I've seen a lot of people, and you're the only one who can portray this role, and it would mean so much to me. And I was practically crying on the phone, and finally she was like, okay, I can't say no.
The tears did it. Good
yeah,
job.
Exactly.
In looking at, there are a lot of cultural differences and things that, you know, in America you point out the fact that we would never hold that truth from somebody, although it definitely works to their favor, and Nai's still around, right? Mm-hmm. But it also, your film really connects us as people. I think we can all relate to every single one of those characters, no matter what our background is. Tell me a little bit about going through the different festivals that you have been to and how that has resonated, not just with Chinese, not just with Chinese Americans, but all the different cultures perhaps.
Yeah, it started really with This American Life. I became very popular at parties, especially hipster parties, because I'd be like in Brooklyn at a party, and you know, someone would hear my name and they'd be like, "Wait, did you do the story in This American Life?" But what was amazing about even doing the radio show, because it only took us a month to make, but it went very wide, is that people, you know, did hear it all over the world, and they were able to say, wow, you know, like my family's Iranian, and you know, we did this to my grandma, and I thought we were the only family, or I thought we were the only culture that did that. And so I got a lot of that, a lot of people coming up to me saying, I thought we were the only family, and I thought it was just like, you know, our extended family, and we're crazy. And to understand that it wasn't just Chinese, it wasn't just Asian even, but a lot of older cultures, you know, like I had people from Egypt, from South America, like just everywhere where, you know, there's, I guess you could call it superstition, or maybe it's just more of like a connection between mind and body, like a belief in like mind and body connection, where the families do exactly this.
Good. And I have to ask you, the bird, the little bird that comes into the window twice, I think, maybe more times than twice, is that symbolic of anything culturally?
No, did it go up? No, it was not like a cultural, anything symbolic. What, for me, it represented, well, just, I think in life, like you can look at something and you can read meaning into it, or you can look at something and go, it's just a bird. I think it's all about perspective. And so if you really pay attention, there are coincidences that happen all around us. And you know, in the last few years, while I was on the road to making this movie, there were always these coincidences, and they're weird because you can't explain it to anyone. You can't be like, I think that bird was, and they would be like, what are you talking about, right? But in a way, if you find meaning in that and it gives you strength, then you can build on that and you can take it as a sign. Or it could be just a bird.
And you talked about being on the road. You were truly on the road because you took cast and crew all the way back to China, to familiar territory. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like emotionally to go back to what was familiar to you and the changes that you saw, kind of like what we saw the character go through?
Yeah, I mean, I was back there for like a location scout, and you know, my grandma got to meet all my producers, and then we went back to shoot the movie, and then when we went back to start prep, she was in the hospital, and so that was really emotional because she was like, I don't want to die because I don't want to ruin your movie during your production. She's like, and I was like, that's, you know, don't worry. And she of course doesn't know what the movie's about or anything, and so I had to be like, there would be no, you know, in my head I'm thinking there would be no movie without you, and so don't worry about that. But then she left the hospital, and so it was just really emotional. We were shooting in her neighborhood oftentimes. We were scouting in her neighborhood. Sometimes we'd have to go to the bathroom, and the closest one would be further away than where my grandma's apartment was. So I just took everyone to my grandma's apartment to pee. And so we just like knock on the door and be like, Grandma, can we pee? And I haven't been there since I was 6. I left the country when I was 6. So it was just so strange in my 30s with like other people who are in their 30s to be like, hi Nai, can we use your bathroom? And then every time we would leave, she would hand us all this food. Like she wouldn't let us leave until we ate some of the food and then brought it back to the crew. So it was just like really wonderful and really emotional, and wonderful just to kind of in a way like join the two parts of my life, the two worlds, you know, and have the opportunity for my colleagues to see me in that world with my family. I had my family see me on set, like my grandma would visit me on set. My great aunt plays herself. Little Nai is Little Nai, and Ellen is her real dog, who really sings. No other dog would sing, so we had to cast Ellen. And so it was just wonderful to like have her like actually be on set to see what I do.
Very good. And I'm just gonna take, oh, thank you. This Want to try? We're good. I'm just going to ask a couple more questions, and then what I would like for you to do in the audience, I'm going to give you guys a chance to ask a question or two. If you want to line up over on this side, there's a microphone. I think there's one right there. So remember, a question has a question mark at the end. We love your comments, but ask a question so the rest of the audience can get a little bit more information about the film. I want to ask you, so think about those questions, go ahead and line up. Music, you are a classically trained pianist who turned into a filmmaker. But in this film, music is a huge component of it. Can you tell us a little bit about the musical score and working with your music director? Because it's a unique score and I didn't really hear it until I saw it the second time with the voices. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I knew I wanted a classical score, and I didn't want piano to be in it. I set out with the idea and talked to my composer about it. And even before I hired my composer, I said I want an all-vocal score. So I wanted to hire someone who had experience in vocal arrangement. And Alex Weston works with Philip Glass. And so he's also classically trained and loved the idea. And it was really inspired for me by Greek choir, the idea of Greek choir, because in Greek choruses in Greek tragedies and comedies, it basically is a group that sings as a unified voice. And so, as a collective, and makes a commentary as a collective. And so the choir, for me, was a representation of the family as a collective unit, and their singular voice as a group, and how that contrasts with the soloist that represents Aquafina's voice, Billy's voice. And similarly, we did the Italian opera for the same reason. I was wanting to, I love melodrama. I think it's a really great area to mine for comedy and pathos, because we're, as humans, can be very melodramatic from the inside, but then from the outside, it can be kind of ridiculous. So yeah, that's where it came from.
And I have one last question before we start, and it's a kind of a fun, hopefully a fun question. I want to know, what was the game that you played at the wedding? Tell us the rules so the next time we have to go to a wedding, we can introduce this fun new game.
Yeah, I intentionally chose not to translate it because it was too complicated, but everyone calls it the chicken dance, but they're actually birds, they're not chickens, and they're flying. And so you're in a circle and everyone gets a number. So you're 1 and I'm 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So you remember your number, and then if I'm 2, I would go 2 bird fly, 2 bird fly, 2 bird flies until 1 bird flies. But in Chinese it rhymes.
Right.
And so then if I say 2 bird flies to 1 bird fly, then you have to take that and you go 1 bird fly, 1 bird fly, 1 bird flies until 5 bird fly, and you keep going. But you throw people off because I know that you're 1, but I'll look over there and I'll say 1 bird fly, and then you miss it.
To be paying attention.
Yeah, so it obviously gets more complicated the more you drink.
Very good. Cheers to that. We'll go ahead to the audience. We've got the woman right here in front.
My name is Natasha. I just wanted to say this movie was really meaningful to me because this actually happened to me. My grandpa had cancer, unfortunately, and he passed away, and my family didn't tell me. So it is real life, it does happen. But I just was curious, did you actually tell Nai that she had cancer? And if you did, or if you didn't, if you could tell a little bit more about the story in real life, that'd be great.
No, she's still around, and she's, her health is deteriorating, and nobody's told her. I don't know how much she maybe knows, intuitively, but no, we haven't told her. And she asks all the time when she can see the movie, so that's also difficult, because seeing the movie would make her really proud, because she was around and on set, and her sister, is an actress in it. But it also means that she would find out that her whole family's been lying to her for 6 years since the wedding of my cousin. So it's complicated.
It's very complicated. Thank you. Thanks.
Hello. First off, this has been one of the best films I've seen on biculturalism, so thank you so much for that. And I was wondering, if the brother is real, is he still married to that girl?
My cousin is still married, yes.
Oh,
They live with their parents. They're good. I think they're good. I don't know.
That's the sequel to this movie.
Hi, my name's Anne. Love the movie. It actually reminded me of my relationship with my wife, so thank you very much. But my question is, as a Chinese American, a lot of the scenes were very familiar to me, like the scene at the cemetery and at the reception. But I also noticed that people found it very funny too. So did you film it with sort of like a double lens in mind, that depending on what background you have, you might find it very comical, even though it's sort of an everyday scene?
Yeah, I always portray the whole film. Every scene I was always looking for the comedy, because that was very true to my experience. Where I would look in this direction and it would be so sad, but then I would look the other direction and it would just be so funny, and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So I definitely set out intentionally to make sure that was portrayed in the movie.
Thank you.
I love your shirt.
Yeah, I wore it just for tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Can you read it to the rest of the audience so we know what it says?
Would you like to read it?
It's an honor just to be Asian. It's Sandra Oh.
Hi, I have a very similar question to the previous one actually, and I was wondering, could you speak to between portraying humor and drama and the balance in telling this story? Did you reach the balance that you wanted to in telling the story? And also, did audiences laugh at what you think were the wrong moments, for example?
I don't think there ever is a wrong moment to laugh. So even in real life, I don't think that there is a wrong moment, because if it's real to that person, then it's okay. I don't sit through all of the screenings, but because I have that rule where I don't have a rule about when it's okay to laugh. It's always fine. But I definitely think that this is my voice, and I've tried to do it in other movies unsuccessfully, and some of the pushback I've actually gotten in the past have been like, this is a serious movie, you can't put comedy in it. And so with this film, if you read the script, it's not, oftentimes the scenes aren't funny, because of, you're reading what's happening in the conversation, and you don't necessarily, without the camera there and what's going on in the background, and without the music and all of these elements and the framing and the composition is where I find the comedy. I think it's always in the juxtaposition of what's happening in the background and the context of what's happening. But the actors I never directed for comedy. The actors, I never told them it was a funny scene and they had to be funny. So they played it real, they played it as a drama. And so oftentimes my actors will tell me afterwards that they're like, wow, that was funny. I had no idea. And in a way that's good, because it keeps them really grounded in the moment.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Priyanka. I'm also an aspiring filmmaker, and I'm working on a film that's in 2 languages as well. So I've got a technical question for you. When you were writing the script, did you write the script entirely in English and translate it later to Mandarin, or how was that process for you?
Yeah, I wrote it in English, but I speak Chinese and I understand Chinese, but I don't write it, and I don't read it. So I wrote it in English, but I heard a lot of the dialogue in Chinese in my head, and I was translating it in my head as I was writing it in English. The problem with that is that afterwards we had a translator who just took the script and translated it, but once they did the translation, I couldn't read it. And so I had my parents read it, and that was my workaround. I had them read it and say, does it sound like the authentic, and does it sound like the local dialect? And they did a bunch of passes on it. But then even after that, we worked on it a lot for like a month, and then once we were in the table read on location in China, I heard it out loud for the first time, and I was like, that's not what was in my head. So then I had to, it just took several different stages and help from different people in order, and even on set, I would say to the actors, that's wrong, say it this way. And they're like, but that's what was written. And I was like, yeah, but I'm the writer, and it's fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, last question. Sorry.
And one more question.
Hi, I had a question about, we saw a couple times in the movie where Awkwafina would pass a group of men and women sort of partying and going out. Is there any significance to the times that they kept showing up?
Not necessarily. Again, I think it's about just juxtaposition and context. Is that, sometimes, in your life is ending because you're losing your grandma and everything like feels like it should be ending, but the world around you just keeps going. And so I think the juxtaposition of that for me was added a lot to the atmosphere of the experience, because you feel so sad and you feel like it should be more meaningful, and the world around you should also stop, but it doesn't.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Please give Lulu another round of applause for a phenomenal film. Thank you everybody for coming. Please vote.